Welcome to the IDRPP's Time to Act Mental Health Echo. My name is Tori Coons and I am project support for Project Echo. I have the privilege to introduce our housekeeping slides before we hear from our presenter. We record our Echo sessions for educational and quality improvement purposes. By participating in this session, you consent to being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, feel free to disconnect from the session. Echo is an interactive community. To help support that, we ask our participants to be engaged in asking questions after our didactic speaker and to provide feedback or ideas during our case presentation or discussion. As our discussions often surround our experiences with kids and families, please protect these individuals' privacy. We ask that you avoid using identifying information such as their name, as well as the names of family members, friends, or coworkers. If you have any questions as to what would be considered identifying information, please reach out to a hub member. All of our hub members have an asterisk before their name or will shortly. During each of our Echo sessions, we have a subject matter expert or didactic speaker, case presentation or discussion, and then professional networking. For this session, we ask that you rename your profile to your first and last name, state, job title, and organization. To rename your profile, click on the participants icon in the bottom menu of the Zoom window, your profile, and then rename your profile in the dialog box. Today, if questions come up during our didactic presentation, we ask that you enter them in the chat. Ty does say that we have some spaces where we can maybe ask questions using the raise hand feature. When that comes up, you can use the raise hand feature by hovering your mouse on the Zoom window to locate the menu by selecting participants and then clicking the raise hand option. It will then pop up on your screen. In our Echo sessions, we ask our participants to respect the presenter by using the chat or raise hand feature to ask questions or contribute. Keep the questions brief and on topic. Introduce yourself and your organization before asking a question, and then turn on your camera during sessions as it helps with connection, building community, and making networking more meaningful. By attending this session, you can earn professional development credits. To do so, please fill out the survey Janelle will be dropping in the chat throughout this session. Canvas is where we store all the information to prepare for, review, and implement the strategies discussed in our Echo sessions. If you would like access to Canvas, email timetoact@aggies.usu.edu, and we will send you instructions for how to register. Case studies are where we share information about real-life situations, hear from colleagues about recommendations, and receive valuable feedback to take and apply. If you are interested in presenting a case, reach out to timetoact@aggies.usu.edu. And I would highly encourage you all to do this if you can think of a case or have one that you would like some more feedback on. We always love to hear from our participants. To stay connected with everything Project Echo, follow our Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. We'll post a lot of announcements or reminders for our sessions, as well as some really cool information or quotes that we hear and learn about. Without any further ado, I'd like to turn the time over to Dr. Ty Aler, who is our presenter today. And I will stop sharing my screen and turn the time over to you, Ty.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction and really looking forward to being here today. I get the opportunity to meet with lots of different types of providers, everything from mental health providers to community health workers. So it's always a genuine joy to get to work with the people doing the work on the front line. I hope today, as we go through this brief introduction or primer on acceptance and commitment therapy, maybe we can find ways or brainstorm ways that this might be included in your varied context, whether that be in home visits, whether that be in in-person mental health services, or in supporting other ancillary like health services. Interestingly, ACT has been kind of done in all of those contexts I just referenced. And so we can talk about those questions and maybe different ways that we can apply this model or framework of therapy into different contexts. And I'll also highlight some of those as we go today. As I've kind of alluded to, we're going to be talking about unlocking the power of acceptance and commitment therapy, or for short, ACT. I'll jump into kind of what we're going over today. So we have a pretty short time, but we have about 1 hour to connect, about 45 to 50 minutes. And I think I want to start with a little bit about who I am and what is my story, or at least a part of it. And I do that pretty purposefully because a lot of what we'll talk about in ACT, especially my flavor of working in ACT, is around values-based moves. And one of those values that I really hold dear is this authenticity piece. And as we talk about using ACT around mental health in different contexts, or maybe with different folks with disabilities, this values alignment and creating action towards those values are what we tend to see improves well-being and quality of life. So as I do this presentation, I'm going to lean really heavily into my own authentic self and kind of hoping maybe to give some experiential activity so you guys can actually experience what ACT would be like. Um, and I'm going to do that experientially throughout the day. Talk a little bit about what is ACT from more of that research or technical lens. My role here at USU is I'm a research assistant professor, and I'm assistant director of the Center for Mental Health Promotion. So I am a researcher by training and I have a captive audience. So, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about my boring research to put you all to sleep. And then we'll transition back into maybe some of those like actual applied pieces on how might ACT help you. And we'll do two activities briefly that maybe will give you a taste of that experiential flavor of ACT and why we think it's so useful for people. And then I'll hopefully highlight some of these ways we've adapted ACT with self-advocates. I look at that list and it feels pretty daunting in 45 minutes, so we'll see how much of it we get through. But that's kind of the journey we're on here today. As I mentioned, I'm a research assistant professor here at Utah State University. My academic department is in the Department of Human Development and Family Science. I'm actually housed here at the Institute for Disability Research, Policy, and Practice. We are a university center for excellence in developmental disabilities. And I work on projects that the Center for Mental Health Promotion contains. So anything that has of or relating to mental health, I tend to work on. A lot of my projects have been either in rural areas with family caregivers of individuals with disabilities, including dementia or parents of children with disabilities. And then I tend to work a lot with autistic adults on a participatory action research team, adapting digital mental health interventions. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist too, so I work 2 days in clinic, seeing about, I depends on no-shows, 10 to 15 people a week. So not a huge clinical load, but enough to keep me really engaged in that clinical process. And as a therapist, I do ACT and use ACT, and train on ACT pretty regularly. So hopefully you'll find some of these things useful today. As a human, this is my wife. Her name's Brittany. She's a social worker at an elementary school. And interestingly, she uses a lot of ACT and a lot of those different types of flavors. They can't do therapy in social work. I mean, not in social work, they can't do therapy in school settings as a social worker, but they do tend to use these skills in coping strategies or coping skills. And we'll talk a little bit about how that looks like in an ACT flavor, just so we can see it across the context. And you'll also see probably pictures of these Rugrats throughout. I don't have as many of Quincy, who's the littlest one there, but I think some of the personal examples I draw on as like a dad of two young girls right now is using ACT in parenting and just like navigating the struggles of parenting that regularly come up. And I'll use those to illustrate some of these examples. As I mentioned with the authenticity piece, I think as I started down the road of trying to improve my mental health and well-being, I actually came into therapy at a pretty young age, as a patient myself, working on some major anxiety-based issues. I approached these a lot from my therapist with cognitive behavioral therapy, and a lot of it was pretty useful. Um, as I went through that journey more through therapy, I started realizing that for me, that anxiety monster, that beast was never going to go away. It comes up, shows up when I go do these presentations. I was laughing earlier that I'm a little spacey and I showed up today at my job and there was a presentation on the board that said an ACT presentation. I was like, oh, that looks fun. I should go to that. Well, here I am. It was actually my presentation giving it. So I had a little bit of anxiety in that oh crap moment of trying to put it together. Some time to use ACT skills. And I want to show you like my background of where that comes from. So I grew up in a rural agricultural family. My dad and my dad's side of the family are all still in the agricultural industry, specifically dairy. They feed dairy cows every day and they tell me to buy lots of milk. So that's kind of the background of life I came from. And we spent a lot of time in the mountains. And this time really helped me see and observe the natural world. And I think one of the most consistent things I observe in that natural world is flexibility. Things are always adapting and trying to be flexible with whatever context arrives. as I look out the window and see this blizzard, plants are flexing. They're being flexible with the atmosphere that's thrown at them, and they have to keep flexing. And that's a central tenet of ACT and why I think it resonated with me. As I started applying that flexibility to anxiety rather than trying to control or shift that mood, I started realizing I can work with that mood more flexibly to allow me to free up time to go do things I care about over time. And that's a hallmark of the ACT model. One of the other things I tend to bring to therapy or how to think about an act is this basics of, biological animals. I grew up around the dairy industry. My family's always had cows, dogs, different animals that we've raised. And, I've helped give birth to cows all the way to dogs. And that piece of giving life all the way up to helping our animals die peacefully, honestly. And in that process, I've realized, this biological piece of us is really important for therapy modalities and working with people to improve well-being. So as you'll hear in some of this ACT work that I do, is I tend to think more of like developmental trajectories and how does development influence context. That's my background and training as a developmentalist. And honestly, it just complements the way I was brought up. Few more pictures here that I think informs kind of, as you'll see all throughout the slides, everything's outdoors. That's how I get my own peace and sanity, is being outside, interacting in that natural world and trying to push my actions toward valued ends. So you'll hear some of this. I think a lot of the things we need to orient to within ACT is behavioral actions towards things we care about. I have this picture of working in the cornfield. I don't know if you guys have done irrigation in cornfields in the middle of July, but it's not the most comfortable environment. But this picture really brings me a lot of joy because when we can shift away from our feelings or be more flexible with them, we may be able to connect more fully with activities we're doing. And this picture, my uncle's actually swearing up a storm about how miserable farming is. And he got a big grin on my face because I'm connecting with being with him. I was learning how to switch his corn's irrigation. And so there are these examples where we can use ACT skills throughout life. And the last one here is actually me trail running. So you'll hear a couple of examples of me using trail running, and I'm do this often where uncomfortable situations come up in your trail running, and you have to be able to pivot in those to kind of keep us going towards that valued end of finishing maybe a race. And so as I've been using these examples, hopefully you can start to hear like, there are times in my life where uncomfortable internal sensations might come up, and it might keep me from doing actions that I really care about. And what we tend to know about humans and really all biological beings, I think, are as we do the things we care about consistently over time, it grows patterns that then bring well-being. So really said differently, what I'm doing with Enact is helping people learn how to work with their internal experiences more flexibly to allow them to keep doing things they care about over time. And when I explain this to my family, they're always like, "Really? That's what you went and got a PhD to do? That sounds like a no-brainer." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what's so cool about it is it really does leverage what's natural in humans and we do naturally to start trying to promote well-being." And we're like, "Okay, Ty, we've heard all of your experiences. Cool. Well, what actually is ACT and what are these technical pieces?" Well, acceptance and commitment therapy is a third wave behavioral therapy. And said differently, what this is there's a lot of different therapies that have evolved over time as researchers do things. The third wave piece really just means they took cognitive behavioral therapy that everyone's kind of heard of from like Aaron Beck, and they said, hey, we're going to sprinkle some glitter of acceptance and mindfulness based components within that. And instead of trying to force or change our thoughts. Things like cognitive distortions was that old CBT model of trying to challenge thoughts or replace them, or maybe challenge feelings by checking facts and doing these different pieces. Maybe instead we'll start actually working with them more acceptingly and mindfully. So when an uncomfortable thought or feeling pops up, instead of trying to get rid of it or maybe trying to do a quick skill to regulate that feeling, at first, we might try to get curious about that feeling and try to get to know it a little bit better and really trying to hold space for it, or said differently, have willingness to experience that feeling. And as we create space for it, it actually usually is able to shift our attention towards maybe more of our actions and doing those things over time. So, as I mentioned, it includes those components of acceptance and mindfulness as a response to eternal experiences. These aren't things aren't necessarily new. If you look at Eastern traditions and the Eastern philosophies, I stumbled upon those in high school, and I really remember once I first read ACT, I was like, "Oh, this reminds me exactly of like Buddhism and Taoism from the Eastern traditions." And yes, it gets a lot of those theoretical underpinnings ACT does from those acceptance and mindfulness-based practices. You'll also see similar elements in things like dialectical behavior therapy and compassion based therapy. We call these third wave behavioral treatments. And what they're really trying to help you do is work more flexibly with your internal experiences, those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, so you could do the things that matter over time. The really important thing, I think, especially as a therapist that works with folks with disabilities, and the piece that I try to really highlight in the ACT work I do is that we want to help people turn towards their valued ends, not societal expectations. So have the opportunity to work with a participatory action research team with folks on the autism spectrum. And as I work with folks, and we get to work with those folks in clinical work too, I often get the feedback that, hey, Ty, this is cute. You're asking me what I want, but society tells me that's wrong pretty often. And one of the things I think that power of ACT is we're not really interested in what society's telling you you should care about. We're really interested in helping people find out what they deeply and inherently care about and use that to guide our actions. So, as an example, one of my clients I've worked with in the past really enjoys frogs to the tune of like, I think 30 frogs in their house at one point in their life. They got a lot of negative feedback about that from societal standards of the smells, the different management from roommates. But as you talk to this person, it helped them engage with a regular practice of caretaking and connection and things that they found deeply inherently rewarding. So even on the outside, as people were judging, like the societal expectation is why would you have that many frogs or animals? That's weird. This person was leaning into, but they helps me cultivate a pattern of action that I find deeply meaningful. And in doing that over time, we're able to improve well-being. You guys are going to get so sick of me saying the kind of that pattern of trying to work with things flexibly, but that's what ACT's trying to do. It's not trying to get rid of it. Trying to work with it more openly, flexibly, almost like it's your friend and you're inviting it in for tea. We actually steal that straight out of Buddhism. The other really cool thing about ACT is it's strength based. So if you're looking and for a therapeutic model and you're working with folks um, that may have experienced some systemic harms or a lot of societal stigma, I think ACT is really useful because it really tries to emphasize and focus on what's working well or trying to promote well-being rather than trying to get rid of like negative symptomology or cure people or fix them. So really what we're trying to orient people to enact is it's actually how we interact with these internal experiences that tend to drive the show on if our well-being is going to improve or not. So, for example, as I showed up this morning, I saw that sign saying, "Oh, an ACTS presentation," and I had the blissful ignorance for a minute. And then it had the oh crap moment of, "Oh, that's February 18th, not March 18th. I forgot my training. Now I got to go pull up the slides. I'm feeling frazzled, right? I can literally feel the sweat coming out my palms, getting all nervous. And I go, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. I'm in a meeting. And I just start to invite that feeling in and try to get curious about it and go, oh, what's it telling me? Well, it's telling me I really care about doing this stuff well. I felt a little silly. I committed to something that I didn't fully prepare for in the right way or how I might have been proud of. And I had an opportunity. I could avoid the thing and avoid that feeling, or I could start getting curious about it and go towards the care. So by working more flexibly with that anxiety that came up and said, it's okay that you're here, you belong, you're telling me that, hey, you care about this going well, I can choose to shift my actions towards maybe a little bit of prep, going through my slides, getting ready to do this presentation and keep the show going. But there might be times where, following COVID, where I started to experience this real intense feeling of like not being able to go into these open spaces like grocery stores, it was really hard to actually get engaged with that action. So what would I do? Hide a home. And then they created grocery delivery. So then I never even had to address that anxious fear. And so at times that anxiety may actually drive my actions away from things I care about. Like I used to live right by the island market, and it kept me from going to the island market for about 2 years because I was so scared of going out. So what did I finally do? Remembered, hey, I love talking to the folks that work there. So I went in and didn't buy anything and just connected with someone I cared about. So sometimes internal experiences may make us choose to go away from what we care about. And what we're trying to do in ACT is help people go more towards what they care about flexibly. So really, what we're trying to help people do is get good at noticing what works and doesn't work for them and how this varies by context and your values. So in my experience, when I come and do presentations with groups of fellow clinicians or providers or people doing work with people on the front lines, it tends to be more accepting for me to show up and maybe be more emphasizing the clinical human nature of the work rather than the technical elements of what my research design was to get to the conclusion, right? And that is contextual. The context is different. This group tends to want more practice applied things. Another context maybe want more research things. So as we're working with ACT, I'm trying to help people think through their contexts. Where are they interacting? Are there more contexts that are more supportive than others? I think one of my favorite quotes, not coming from ACT, but coming from another third wave behavioral therapy from Dr. Marshall Linehan, is that and this isn't a direct quote, but it's a summary of an idea. There are some environments that are just not validating. So when I'm working with folks using the ACT, we're trying to start with getting curious on, is this action or the things that are coming up a part of that environment? Or is it something the person's experiencing? So as you'll start to see, ACT helps us create a bioecological framework. And I'll give you some of the specific points I look at to help you guys think about that. Another important assumption with ACT is that there are no truths, only self-identified valued ends. Um, this is often one of the most argued pieces in like the scientific literature, but I think from a clinician's perspective, it works really, really well. I really try to just put on the person's hat that comes into that room each time, and we try to figure out what's working and not working in their individual context and how the things they bring to the table might work or not work within that context. Usually, this is where providers are like, well, yeah, no duh, that's what we all do. And this is actually another one of, I think, the strengths of ACT is that it's done really well at incorporating common elements of all of our different therapies and finding ways to make them into very actionable clinical steps. The other piece that I think ACT really tries to cultivate as an assumption is this turning towards curiosity on what will work. We're not really interested in symptom amelioration. We're more interested in helping you cultivate or build patterns of action over time, regardless of what shows up. So this really helps us cultivate this curiosity piece. This also can help us actually get unstuck from ways that we think. So one of the examples, if anyone out there are coffee drinkers, one of the most like salient examples I've ever heard of this shifting towards curiosity on what will work and that may be different than what our mind is telling us is this coffee maker example. So some coffee makers, to get stronger, blacker coffee, you actually have to put less brew in and pack it less. But the assumption for most people is they'd be packing it more, especially if they've never owned this coffee maker. So our minds often tell us to get more, you have to push harder, do more. But at times it's actually doing less and being more flexible. And so there are these patterns where our minds kind of create rules that then govern our actions. And curiosity is one of those moves we can try to start cultivating to go, huh, what's actually going to work in my context? So we're creating space again, and you'll hear that as a common theme. So, Ty, what you guys should be asking then is like, cool, I kind of get it. I'm starting to see how ACT, but what does it actually help with? So, as a quick overview of what does ACT help with, has over 1,000 randomized control trials examining its effectiveness. And I don't think I've updated this slide this year. So I think we're actually closer to 1,300-ish now as an Association for Contextual Behavioral Science community that's worldwide. Um, and the American Psychological Association supports ACT as an effective treatment for chronic pain, depression, mixed anxiety, OCD, psychosis. We've ran trials with parents of children with disabilities, parent or not parents, family caregivers of individuals with dementia. We've ran trials with individuals with dementia, autistic adults to improve quality of life. So we've worked with lots of different groups, and what we tend to notice is that ACT delivered in multiple formats, whether it be in person, whether it be via telehealth, or whether it be on more accessible digital mental health interventions that are self-guided, it tends to improve outcomes over time, even when we put it in randomized controlled trials, the highest level of evidence. There's always room to grow, and there's lots of caveats, and I'll cover a couple of those. But in general, what we tend to see is that across the lifespan, ACT, or this concept of psychological flexibility, the ability to work flexibly with your internal experiences, like thoughts and feelings or sensations, when you can do that more, it explains our outcomes and health risk factors, everything from like cardiovascular health all the way down to mental health concerns. When we look in our trials of like ACT interventions and we start asking, well, what about this intervention is helping drive the change? We tend to know more openness with feelings, awareness of our internal experiences, and then committed action towards behavioral ends are what drive those changes. Said differently, that we just call that psych flex. By when we're improving psychological and psychological flexibility, outcomes tend to improve for people. So, some of the criticisms from a research standpoint that I think are a little bit beyond the purview of this conversation is that, well, ACT is just effectively doing what all these other interventions are doing over time. And to be honest, yeah, that's actually kind of how ACT was developed. If you look up, I think one of the original ACT articles in 2012, I think it's 11 at our all article about the components. They reviewed over like 28,000 articles or something ridiculous with grad students over a 5 or 6 year period and developed the ACT model based off of all of what worked in psychological literature, and they made it into one holistic model. That's a really muddied down version of the process they went through, and there's more complexities to that. But if you, as a clinician or someone starting to work with ACT, you're like, oh, this feels familiar. That's often what ACT clinicians tell us as we're first training them, is like, oh, this fits really well and complements other things I'm doing. And that's the important thing is I think ACT can complement a lot of the work we're already doing rather than replace it. So how does it actually work, Ty? Well, it works by increasing this psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility is this ability to contact the present moment more fully as a conscious human being and to change or persist in behavior when doing so serves valued ends. I throw up this picture of me suffering here. It's a I've DNF'd this race that this picture is at, the White Pine 50. DNF'd twice now, third time's the charm, guys. That's this year. And it's taken a lot of psychological flexibility. Even seeing this picture, I can very much remember the pain I was in physically and emotionally. I had literally just been bawling as I walked up a mountain and I was like, oh, this is so much. It was taking up so much space. And so one of the things I had to start doing is inviting that feeling in. Well, when you're at mile, 33 and you're feeling pretty crappy, you have to start inviting that in and it gets a little overwhelming. So I sat my butt down on a rock and just started doing some breathing and some awareness of that feeling to try to cultivate and create space. And as I did that, I actually noticed my central nervous system started to calm down a little bit. And as that started to calm down, my attentional focus was able to start shifting to where I wanted it to go. And I won't go there too much because I'll just start crying. But the values of like my kids often comes up, and I do a lot of the things I do for the value of like showing my kids you can do hard things. Like I even get teary as I'm connecting with it right now. And I think what we're trying to do in ACT is help people work more flexibly with those feelings so that they can come back into contact with what matters to them and then keep taking that step so they can get up and take this cool picture at White Pine. So at any time, we can use this. I see I even have tears running down my face. We can have this psych flex piece come into action and be able to help us do this work. And we can apply it across contexts, whether it be selfish pursuits like trail running, where I get to be out by myself, or whether it be parenting or being a therapist like I was using in practice yesterday, or even consulting groups. We try to use an ACT framework to help people think through how to use it. So what does the ACT model actually say and like what do we do? Well, there are 6 main pivots or moves within the ACT framework, and it's described by this hexaflex. To be completely candid, I think the hexaflex is overly complicated, and I tend to use just 3 pillars of open, aware, and engaged. And I'll talk to you about how those tend to fit in. But generally, this is the 6 things we're trying to help people do more of in the ACT model. It might be practicing more acceptance or willingness, being willing to experience difficult thoughts and feelings as they come up. Thinking of that running experience again, I remember about 2 weeks before my last DNF fitness race, I was running up, where was I at? I was up Oh, Green Canyon. And literally, I just had this fear hit me and I wanted to quit the run. And I was like, oh, dude, you got to just learn how to live with the fear again. So, again, I'm a crier, started bawling as I'm running up the hill. And as people are coming down, they're seeing me bawling up the hill, really awkward and uncomfortable. But I just had to practice being okay with that feeling again. I know for me, anxiety comes on and it tells my body, hey, stop, leave, do whatever you can to get out of it. And some of that's exposure or willingness. I go, hey, it's always told me something I cared about. Every time I felt anxious, it's reminded me of something I care about. And if I try to remember that and be willing to experience it, I start opening up to it. So then I can start practicing this cognitive fusion or maybe getting some separation from some unhelpful thoughts. So if I'm using that example of running up Green Canyon, bawling to myself about how scared I am, the thoughts that kept coming up are, you will never be able to make it. You can't do this. It's too hard for you. You're not an athlete. You can't do it. My mind was being pretty freaking chatty about a lot of unhelpful things, wasn't being the best cheerleader. So one of the ways we help people do is thanking our mind. So I started thanking my mind for telling me that this thing I was doing was pretty dang hard and that I really cared about it. And by doing that, I was able to actually get a little bit unhooked from my thoughts and I intentional focus started going back to, well, this matters to me. I want to take the next step. And by doing that, I was able to start cultivating more presence and awareness. Interestingly, when you're trail running, awareness can sometimes be your downfall. It gets a little too painful and you may have to zone out a little bit. But that cultivation of awareness is mindfulness based skills a lot of people talk about. Then remembering who am I in this context? And maybe sometimes I'm unathletic when I'm binge watching, Stranger Things season 4 or something, or season 5 on TV. But there are other times where I'm really active. So depending on my context, myself changed. And that can be helpful in helping people align their actions more with who they want. The other piece then that starts freeing and we cultivate is these values or qualities we want to bring to our actions. So, as I mentioned, the thing that really brings tears to my eyes is like showing up consistently, whether we get the outcome or not we want. I'm a big believer that we have to just do things to cultivate valued ends rather than trying to get an outcome of, I want to win a race or I want to finish. I just want to show up and show up in a way I'm proud. And using that compass of values to guide it is really helpful. Then shifting people's towards committed action, actually doing the crap that you have to do to create a pattern, right? So I think one of the things ACT has been really good and distills from that behavioral activation, the old school, the most effective depression treatment is it says, how do we get people taking steps towards the things they care about? And collectively, when we do this and increase these things in folks, we call that increasing their psychological flexibility or their flexibility with their internal experiences over time. All right, that was a lot of me blabbing and monologuing. So now we're going to hopefully actually experience it. So this reminds me of man, these pictures are old. This is Kennedy like 4 years ago. So I want to walk you guys through an activity of maybe actually trying to experience what acceptance feels like and some of that willingness. So if you guys are in a spot, I would just encourage you to join. We're going to start by just taking a moment, take a deep breath. Maybe if you're finding my voice obnoxious or too energized, I'll try to slow that down a little bit. And it's really just kind of bringing your feet to rest on the ground so you can be aware of what's going on for yourself. And as you do that, I want us to try to remember a time at work when you were handling either a project or maybe a relationship with like a colleague or really any other of the million things that pop up at work that feel really hard. And that hard feeling has to be something that has caught your attention and that you were like, I did something really hard at work, but I did it in a way and showed up in a way I was proud of. So take just a minute to try to think back in your memories of a way of something that you went through at work that was hard, but you responded to it in a way you were proud. Take about 30 seconds here. And as we close out this 30 seconds and you're remembering that memory of when you handled something hard in a way that you were proud of, I want you to just kind of touch base with what you're feeling. Maybe take a mental snapshot of that feeling or kind of that experience you're having. And then try to imagine you had to put yourself in a statue. And that statue, that's why Kennedy's up here riding the lion, because she's always fierce and growling at us. What would your statue look like? Maybe throw that into chat here. Is like, what would we see your statue looking like as you handled something hard at work that you're proud of? I think for me, that statue would often look like me sitting, having good posture, not like I have right now, and having open shoulders and being more open to my experience and just feeling very open and aware of things. So if you're comfortable, throw that into chat. And if not, I want you to just maybe write down a note because we're going to do one more activity here. So now I want you to try to remember a time at work when you handled something hard and you did it in a way you were not proud. Maybe something in a relationship, an interpersonal conflict, or maybe how you showed up on a specific activity is done in a way you weren't super proud of. I want you to just take 20 or 30 seconds here and think of that moment for just a second. As you're reflecting on that experience, I'd also try to think of like, if I were throwing myself into a statue now and someone were seeing it, what would they see? Maybe take just a second and jot those notes down. Thanks, Laurie. Yeah, saying on the first one, Rocky running up the stairs and reaching the top. That's a pretty common one too, as I think that's pretty hallmark of feeling like, I've done something hard in a way I'm proud. You see his arms up too, right? Like his arms are up, chanting more positive energy. Yep. What about this one? At a time at work when you handled something and you weren't as proud. I think for me, my mind often goes to like laying in the fetal position, honestly, or some type of, hunch down, shoulders crunch, leaning over that protection mode of like, ooh. And this is interesting, right? It's like both experiences were painful. And in the one, many people will describe them approaching the feeling in a more open and aware type way. That Rocky feeling, yay, I'm open, I'm aware. This experience that's coming to me, I'm willing to feel it and go through it. Whereas often, if we're thinking of that pain that comes up in a time we didn't handle as well and we weren't aligned with our values, it causes a lot of pain and we shut down. We're not willing to experience the feeling and we're trying to turn away from it pretty quickly. We might even start doing actions that lead us farther away from the person we want to be as we're trying to avoid that feeling. So, hopefully, as you guys did that activity, you started to maybe recall those moments in your life where you've practiced psychological flexibility, where you've had a moment that was really hard. You were able to be open to that experience, connect with what mattered to you, and then did an action that moved you closer towards that valued end. Let me hurry and open chat here, see if there were any thoughts. Yeah, the thinker. I like that, Avante. Yeah, it has deep thought processing face to it. So that first activity right there is really just trying to practice that openness or acceptance or willingness to feelings. It's a primary move within ACT that we try to work with people. If we're coming in and we're really shut down from our feelings, we're not able to really notice them, it's really hard to gauge our actions towards creating purpose because purpose is a really strong feeling. Hell, I break down in a presentation with a bunch of professionals as I'm connecting with that purpose. And even as it starts coming back to my mind, it's like, oh, instant tears. My wife laughs at me. She says I'm the biggest crier on YouTube lately because I've been watching these ultra stories of people succeeding, and I'm like, oh, they're moving. It's that purpose that we're connected to. So to feel that, we have to be open and willing to experience both the pain and the good. But that's not all of it. What else do we have to do? And I think that other piece is trying to align our actions with the valued ends. So I have this picture. I have lots of garden boxes at my house. I grew up, and you'll see on one of my last slides, my grandpa's garden that I grew up managing every summer with my grandparents. Honestly, it's about 3/4 of an acre. Um, and what this type of work helped me learn how to do over time as a kid is consistently put action towards something that I care about, even if I may not get the outcome. There are hundreds of plants you grow every year that don't always produce the fruit in the way you think they're going to, or maybe produce what you want, or a storm pops up. But what I've got to do consistently over time is keep planting and watering the plants. So by being more open to those experiences, like we did in that last slide of acceptance, we can then start deciding, okay, well, what matters to me? And what matters to me, and like as a parent, is helping create creative experiences that are novel that help my kid learn how to do things over time consistently. So what do we do now here? We're planting plants. And that's kind of one of the big metaphors I use in ACT is once we start being more open and willing to feel our feelings, then we have to be more willing to start doing the actions that guide us towards the things we care about, even if it brings up uncomfortable stuff. So, what you guys don't hear in this picture is my daughter freaking out about how stupid it is she has to plant plants and how frustrated it is she has to do chores. This was about 3 years ago, the first year of our garden boxes. Now she's already helping me plan out planting our garden this spring because she gets so stoked on seeing life come. So over time, she was able to connect with that purpose, and now she's out gardening with us. How we might orient people to that in that last activity is I might ask them, hey, in that time that you handled something hard at work, but you were proud of, how did you show up? What were those qualities that you brought to your actions? What mattered to you? And did your actions reflect it? And so now we can start, as people start becoming more open to feel their feelings, they can actually start guiding towards their purpose and maybe cultivating this change through planting their own garden. So I'm doing an inventory here on where we're at with slides. And I'll walk you through this. So given maybe some more examples of how ACT does this, I wanted to just walk you through maybe the co-creation process we went through in developing a valued living and our valued living light, which are digital mental health interventions designed with autistic adults to improve quality of life. This process that we actually use with lots of different groups that I collaborate with Dr. Mike Levin at the USU ACT Research Lab. Recently, we were funded to do this with family caregivers of individuals with dementia. We've been funded to do it with parents of children with disabilities, funded to do it with autistic adults, lots of different groups. So this process that I'm describing, while useful for our one project or related to that one project, has been applied across lots of projects. So I bring that up because as I've worked with like community health workers or even like nurses, medical doctors, as we start planting the seeds of, hey, look, this is how it can look for different groups. A lot of times folks are like, hey, I think this could help my group. How would we start applying it? So I'll show you how I've done that in working with autistic adults. So in co-creating change, we assembled a participatory action research team that included clinicians, researchers, self-advocates, family caregiver or family, not just family caregivers, but like parents of children with autism. And we all came together and we started talking about what works well and what doesn't work so well in the mental health space for folks on the autism spectrum. Some of the things that we heard worked well are, hey, when you actually try to help me improve my quality of life, or when you actually ask me what I care about, like my values, or hey, when you actually ask me what works well for me already, these strengths-based pieces that ACT already naturally inherently does. And what doesn't work so well for these folks? Well, I'm scared that you'll tell me what to be, or who to be, or how to act, or what to care about. All of these societal shoulds, the shoulding all over yourself that we tend to do as humans, and that society tries to help us drive. So through time, what we started understanding is, oh, some of our mental health treatments, maybe for autistic adults, aren't helping them actually promote quality of life because they're too focused on trying to get rid of maybe depression or anxiety. So what might this look like in an ACT lens? Well, we created this 6 session protocol that really focuses on trying to orient folks to a new way of doing. So in our first session, we talk about, hey, we want to help you identify your choice points in life where uncomfortable thoughts and feelings may arise, and you're going to have an opportunity to choose. Am I going to choose to go towards the valued ends of the things I care about? Or are we going to choose to go away from the feeling because it's too uncomfortable? And if we start understanding that choice point, and there are skills that we can use to help us go more towards those valued ends, we're able to actually start maybe taking more direction in our life that helps us kind of create or grow that garden of plants. We can do this through maybe understanding our emotions and what they're trying to alert us to and the things we care about, how sensations make up those feelings, and how maybe as we are working across cultures or groups, for instance, like autistic adults and how they experience their emotions are often described very differently than non-autistic adults. So, how do we create a shared language? I think ACT does really well at that because it's more about what's working and not working. And we can do that with emotions or maybe how thoughts pop up and watch your mind. And then we really pivot towards, well, how do you actually want to act? And what are these qualities we want to bring to our actions? And how do you find that out across contexts? How do you get curious and keep asking yourself what matters and when I need to pivot that? And then as we start doing that, it's likely to bring up a lot of shame because we're often not acting in the ways that we're fully proud of, whether that be because of societal stigma, whether that be because of our environment, or lots of different reasons. We may need to cultivate and practice some of this self compassion as uncomfortable thoughts and feelings come up to help us regulate them to then be able to go do our committed actions towards our valued ends. In our digital mental health intervention, this is actually what it looks like. It's two screen grabs out of those. So we actually talk about how we might have these moments or these choice points where we could choose to turn towards our values or away from those values. Hmm. Just because of the sake of time, we won't do the values writing, but I'll end on this note as our time comes to an end, is that uh, much like a garden, and these are pictures of the garden I've referenced a few times, change and how ACT works with change really is about a process. And that outcome of what we're trying to do is get people engaged with the process. And that process then becomes the outcome. And it's one of those weird like paradoxes where if we focus on the outcome, we're never going to win. If we're only going after the championship game, we're likely never going to win the championship. But if we show up and really get good at shooting free throws, this is me being an Aggie fan right now. I'm like, guys, we need to practice our freaking free throws still. We're shooting below 80%. This is ridiculous. Um, but maybe if we practice that process, the outcome will come. Maybe we'll make it to a third round in the NCAA tournament for the first time in ever. Or maybe we'll be too focused on making it to the third round of the outcome that we'll miss out on those process pieces. Sports examples, I think, are some of the most salient in our culture right now. If you go read any quote by Nick Saban, after who was the famous Alabama head coach for a lot of years, he goes into has a 50-point blowout and he's still mad at his team for not engaging with the process. That's what ACT is trying to teach is like, hey, the outcomes will come because what we're trying to create is a purposeful life. And we do that by engaging fully and purposefully through each step of life. And these pictures of the garden, I think, bring this to life is my grandpa, this is where he starts in the spring, and slowly he's able to cultivate over this large garden that provides food to my 60 cousins and all of my aunts and uncles every year. It's a major production my grandpa's done. And you actually can't see, but we have like 1,000 pheasants and 10, 20 ducks and freaking 8 cows behind this. And this is all in the middle of Hiram. So this guy has taught me a lot of, hey, to do things that you want purposeful, you've got to consistently chip at it away with valued ends, things you care about, even though the uncomfortable feelings come up. And if you've ever worked with Grandpa Randy in the garden, you'll have a lot of those come up because he's a little brash at times when he's working. So hopefully you've heard today throughout our presentation on ACT is it's a third wave behavioral treatment that really can work across the myriad of psychological issues, across a variety of contexts, and be delivered in different ways. There are very accessible activities that work with folks both in and out of the disability community that are informed by ACT. And it can be applied at both like a skill facilitation level, which bachelor levels folks can help with, all the way up to uh, in-depth inpatient therapy services like for outpatient or inpatient treatment centers. So all that to say is ACT sometimes can feel like this magic bullet. And it doesn't work for everyone, but it does seem to be pretty flexible. If you're wanting to connect more, you can feel free to reach out to me here at this email. You guys can also reach out to the USU Echo team, and I'm sure they can help us connect. I'll be here for the 10 minutes for the Q&A, so I'd love to hear if you guys have any questions. And hopefully this gives you a little sense, if you've never tasted ACT, of what it is, how it can look, maybe even experience some of that. Um, and then hopefully maybe you've gotten some excitement about it and maybe you want to try to think about applying it in your different contexts. Thanks so much for your time and your engagement in the activities, and we'll turn it over to questions here, if there are any.
I just want to say thank you, Ty. That was an amazing presentation. I know I learned a lot. I was definitely sitting here thinking about all the times this week when I probably could have used ACT a little bit more in my life. So again, like you said, if anyone has any questions, now is a perfect time to come off mute, raise your hand, or put it in the chat. I do know that we had a question a little while ago. I think it was when we were talking about the 6 different principles of ACT, by Rachel. I think she said, do these things go in a cycle or happen randomly?
Oh, I'm so sorry I missed your question. I was doing my best to catch those.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think in general, the idea behind PsychFlex is that it's an inherent process that's happening in humans. And as researchers, we like to try to measure everything. So we broke it down into these nice 6 categories that we feel are really distinct. And we're like, oh, look at how cool we're measuring these things. But what we tend to know with people is we're using them all pretty simultaneously. Interestingly, like in a clinical setting, if someone comes into my clinic, if I give them, there's something called oh, you guys are going to test me. It's a psychological flexibility. It's like the MMPI, the multi something psychological flexibility inventory. It's like 26 questions. And I can actually dig down to which of the 6 processes they might be lower on that they're self-rated. So one of the ways we can tailor treatments is actually as they come in, give them an assessment and say, hey, seems like this activity might be better for you initially because that's the process you are raking low. So that's one way. I think it's general as a therapist. What I tend to do is really overly emphasize the valued ends of what patterns they're wanting to create. And then we're using those pivots, all 6 of them, pretty simultaneously in therapy. Some days, like we're maybe overemphasizing one skill, but other days, like we're going through all 6 of them in one session, just trying to get into the practice of practicing psych flex in context. And if you read 100 different ACT books, they're all going to talk about it differently. So I think that's some of the authenticity as a human. I'm pretty ADHD and a little bit like I like to have spraz all the time. So if I get bored, I become a less useful therapist, I think. So one of the things I really value in therapy is flexibility and just going where passion goes. And so sometimes we may not ever even touch some of those pivots with a person. We may be overly emphasized on values and trying to get valued ends. In fact, some of our single session interventions, that's all we talk about, are doing values moves and trying to get people more connected with what they care about. So it's a good question. Do all those 6 things need to happen? In general, we say that's what makes up PsychFlex and can drive change. Can people improve by just one? Yeah, they can.
That was a great answer. I'm just going to speak for Rachel, I guess. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to again come off mute or put it in the chat, raise your hand.
You know, I've never been one to think I would have done well on a service mission of any type trying to get people convinced of an idea, but I hope y'all are convinced of the idea of the utility of ACT after our time together, because I do think it's a very powerful tool we can use across our social sciences work. So thanks again, everyone, for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Sorry, I'm just gonna give a little bit longer just in case anyone has something come up. I hope you know, just waiting for that. I do have, I guess, a question if nobody else does. So I know today we talked a lot about like the accepting parts of ACT, but once you like do the accepting work, how do you like facilitate like maybe more of the intervention and action steps? You know what I mean? So like if you're accepting like these hard feelings of anxiety, I assume you don't just leave it there. What do you do next?
Yeah, I think that so one of I think the magics of doing good therapy is trying to get really curious about what people care about from the very get-go. So as I'm working with someone, whether it be in like trainings, because I actually deliver these trainings and as interventions to groups of 200, and as groups, we tend to have collective values of how we work together. Like when I work with community health workers, so as we're trying to hear those things, usually anxieties inform us of what matters most to people. So as they're talking about their anxieties, you can pretty quickly tell, like, oh, this is the thing they want and the thing they want to move closer to. And as they do that over time, it probably improve their quality of life and the anxiety is likely to go down. So as we're doing acceptance, it actually is really good at teaching us what matters and what do we care about and where do we want to use our compass to guide us towards. So as we're doing acceptance work, it actually opens our mind to, oh, where do we need to take steps? And often the indicators of, ooh, that feels really intense are good indicators of that's where we need to take steps. So then it's thinking through behavioral activation, which are, things like SMART goals or breaking things down into bite-sized pieces. Our favorite in our house is How Do We Eat an Elephant? It's a spot being a bite by bite. I got to watch that with my daughter last night as she started doing pull-ups. This freaking kid is insane to me. Like I was doing pull-ups and she saw it. She's like, "Oh, I can do that. I'll start with a bite." And she just hung there last week, and now she did her first full pull-up by herself. So, she's crazy. Stepping it by bite and then aligning it with, oh, she gets to connect as parents together, like as a parent child. So we're able to do it together. Um, so the action steps really need to be aligned with that compass of what matters. And in doing so, then we can start finding the pathway. Do we go down pathways that are sometimes dead ends in life? Yep. And that's another opportunity for us to practice the acceptance and willingness and time to pivot again. So we're never trying to go towards an outcome. We're just trying to walk through life in a way we're proud of. And in doing so, we tend to get more of the outcomes we want.
Thank you. That was a great response and definitely a lot to consider. If anyone else has anything come up for them, that's just fine. We have a couple of minutes we can ask questions. Or we can move on to the case presentation, depending on what everyone
Victoria,
wants.
I think you're good to move on to the
Okay.
case. Ty, thank you.
And thanks again, everyone, so much. Thank you.
Sounds perfect. Then I'm just going to share my screen fast to present our case because I'm going to be presenting today. Let me actually get this pulled up first. And now it's not going to let me. There we go. I had to make sure I could see you guys so I can start the screen share. Okay, guys. So I am presenting our case today. Let me see if it will come back up on this screen. Okay, now we're good to go. So for our case, now I need to rearrange all my Zoom stuff. Okay, so for our case, we're going to be talking about the Bennett family. There's two children. There's Liam, who's 3 years old. He had a full, like, his birth was full term and uncomplicated. But Gracie, the 2-month-old, was like born premature due to preeclampsia. The parents, Megan, was recently diagnosed with postpartum depression, anxiety, and suffers from some insomnia. Her lack of sleep has been exacerbating her depression and anxiety symptoms, resulting in her reduced ability to care for her kids. Josh, the dad, his mom has been staying with them and helping Megan out during the day. However, she needs to return to her job soon in order to qualify for her retirement. Josh, the dad of this family, works 16-hour shifts to pay off the hospital bills from Gracie's recent birth. And then when he gets home, he tends to take over for his mother and taking care of the kids. leaving a lot of exhaustion in him just for the sheer amount of caretaking. So additional background information. Liam has recently begun exhibiting significant separation anxiety, characterized by like prolonged periods of distress and crying, often lasting over an hour. This tends to happen like when his father leaves for work in the morning and also throughout the day. He has like heightened emotional reactivity with intense outbursts in response to minor frustrations like being asked to assist with toy cleanup or when accidental spills occur. Liam also experiences frequent nighttime awakenings, typically 3 to 4 times per night, often accompanied by nightmares. The initial response is often provided by Megan, who is awake due to her own sleep difficulties. However, Josh usually has to come in and support Liam in returning to sleep. Because of these nightmares and this kind of whole disruptive process, Liam has developed a growing fear of bedtime, which results in more distressing outbursts each evening. Liam previously had a strong emotional connection with Megan, but his increased distress and frequency of outbursts have become overwhelming for her, contributing to a sense of disconnection between them. Gracie initially experienced some difficulty with breastfeeding, but has since established effective feeding patterns. And Megan feels more able to keep up with Gracie's needs, so she tends to be the primary caregiver. So our primary areas of concern are with Liam and his heightened separation distress demonstrated by clinginess and tantrums when Josh leaves, his frequent nightmares and significant bedtime anxiety, and then diminished relational connection with Megan, likely influenced by her current emotional health and reduced availability. Megan is currently initiating treatment for postpartum depression, anxiety, and her insomnia with medications that are prescribed and compatible with breastfeeding. However, therapeutic effects have not yet been started or realized. She also has limited social support with primary assistance coming from her husband and mother-in-law, and this is mainly due to the geographic distance between her and her own family. So primary areas of concern continued are Josh and his experiencing substantial fatigue and stress related to work demands and caregiving responsibilities. And also the fact that his support from his mother is temporary as she must return home and to work, which will reduce available respite. So our goals and barriers. So our goals for Liam include enhancing emotional regulation and increasing his sense of safety during separation from his father, supporting Liam in achieving consistent, restful sleep and reducing bedtime-related anxiety and emotional outbursts, and then strengthening the relational connection between Liam and Megan to promote greater balance, attunement, and stability within the home. Some barriers are Megan's postpartum depression, anxiety, and insomnia experience, which may affect her emotional capacity and availability, and then Josh's extended work hours and resulting fatigue. So our community discussion is going to center around these questions of like what strategies can be implemented to help Liam develop self-soothing skills during this transition and at bedtime, and then which graduated separation approaches might best support Liam's adjustment and sense of security. Also, how can caregivers respond to nightmares in a manner that provides comfort while also supporting the child's return to sleep, and again, without reinforcing avoidance behaviors. And then what coaching strategies could help Megan remain connected and responsive to Liam, even when she feels overwhelmed? In what ways can we support Josh in obtaining more rest while managing his work responsibilities and caregiving roles? And then lastly, what resources or services could be recommended to this family to assist with respite care and additional support for Liam's needs? So if we are good to go into breakout rooms, Janelle, you can open those. Well, welcome back from our breakout rooms, everybody. I know we had a really great conversation. Janelle, there was only 2 breakout rooms, right? Okay, perfect. Then will Kurt or Stephanie share what we talked about in ours?
I took the notes, so I should probably share. I mean, Stephanie could if she wants to, for sure. But we talked a lot about the coaching for the mom, but particularly about the supports and the resources around. There's a lot of resources. There's a family support center in Provo. I think they said it was called Family Haven. I know there's a family center up here in Utah. I think most communities have of a decent size have some sort of support center that will offer respite or some therapies or different things like that. Also, one of the things that came up that I thought was really good that Lupita brought up was activities in the local library. Gets kids out around other kids and moms around other moms or dads or caregivers so that Megan can have some socialization while her kid is engaging with other kids. Also, the 211's there to find resources. And then we, toward the end, I just mentioned, I'll mention here just because it's out there. The USU Extension has a lot of good information on parenting and child rearing and all that type of relationships within families and that. And so USU Extension is a great resource to go find information on how to do a lot of things that people on this ECHOS network usually the cases struggle with. So
Thank you, Kurt. That's a perfect sum up. And then is it JC or Leo who did the other?
I
Right,
took
Kurt?
notes for that group. I think a lot of our conversation, well, not a lot of it, but because we got a lot of great suggestions, but I think one of the main ideas was just kind of keeping consistent schedules for Liam as we're trying to develop those self-soothing skills during transitions and at bedtime. Just because if he doesn't have those consistent schedules and routines at bedtime, then there's not necessarily a possibility of having really dead set self-soothing skills within Liam that he has already developed. So I think once you start implementing those consistent routines, it should hopefully make things better at bedtime. And as well as with the nightmares, I think just scanning the environment or just even looking at the external environment, because maybe Liam is processing that in a way that we're not really understanding and we're not realizing. And that's why he's having those nightmares. Or I think even just walking. Provider mentioned just like before going to bed, doing a routine to kind of explore the room and showing Liam that that room is safe. And once you do it as a routine, it can become consistent and he can become even more comfortable at bedtime. So lots of really good ideas.
It sounds like it. I was like, it sounds like both groups had great conversations. Thank you, everyone, for your ideas and support of this family. Just in wrapping up, since it's almost time, I want to remind those who took notes to send it to timetoact@aggies.usu.edu, just so we can collect those and send them out later. Also, our next session is going to be March 18th on compassion, burnout, and empathetic care. But did we change that to a different title? I wonder if we
Yeah,
did.
it's
That's
going
what
to
I
be
thought.
actually a presenter on the mind-body bridging modality that is
That's what I was gonna.
here at USU. So we'll have a different presenter than we originally thought.
Okay, and then that's Yvonne Marcy's. I probably
Yvonne
butchered
Marcy's,
that.
Yvonne, yeah, Yvonne will be doing that.
Okay, perfect. Well, we're really excited for that, and thank you, JC, for help getting that connection going. So we hope to see the rest of you guys there. If you can complete the survey that Janelle has been dropping in the chat, we would love to hear your suggestions and comments. That's also how you can get credit for attending. So thank you again to Ty for presenting, or Dr. Aller, I should probably say. And thank you guys for your participation. We love to have you on our sessions. But have a good rest of your day.